Everyone. My name is Nafeesa Hashmi. I'm a family nurse practitioner at a rural health clinic, and I'm a DNP candidate from Maryville University. My project was based on telemedicine self care intervention for obesity management in underserved rural adults. Before starting my presentation, I would like to thank my project committee, Dr. Robin Hendricks, my DNP project chair, who has guided this project from its inception. I would also like to thank my second reader, Dr. Don Martes, and my community member, Dr. Nindita Chada, for their time, expertise, and support throughout this process. Let's start with background and significance of this project. Obesity remains one of the most pressing public health challenges in US, and its burden falls disproportionately on rural underserved population. Patients in these communities often face provider shortage, long travel distance, and limited access to structured weight management program, which widen existing healthcare disparities. Telemedicine has emerged as a promising, scalable strategy to extend coaching, self-monitoring support, and behavioral enforcement to patients who would otherwise go without this kind of care. The purpose of this project was to evaluate whether an 8 weeks telemedicine based self care intervention could improve BMI among rural adults with obesity. The significance of this work lies in the potential to inform cost effective, scalable model that primary care and rural telehealth practices can realistically adopt. Before describing the project itself, I want to briefly ground it in the existing literature. 2020 cluster randomized trial demonstrated that clinic based lifestyle coaching can produce significant weight loss among underserved patients, which supported the coaching based design used here. Perry and colleagues in 2020 telehealth extended care trial showed that virtual follow up sustained weight loss maintenance in rural communities better than usual care. The Propel trial by Drolling and colleagues in 2022 identified specific behavioral mediators like self monitoring and session attendance that drive weight changes in underserved primary care patients. A 2025 meta analysis found that nursing led telemedicine intervention produced an average BMI reduction of about 1.05 kilograms per meter square, giving a benchmark for comparison. Narisema and colleagues in 2023 work on WHO digital adaptation kit reinforce the value of digital self-care tools. And Jay and Shai in 2024 study connected e-health literacy and self-efficacy to social cognitive theory, the framework I will describe next. Taken together, this literature shows a strong support for telemedicine and coaching intervention individually. But very few studies combine structured telemedicine coaching with a structured self monitoring, especially in rural underserved obesity population. That gap is what this project set out to address. This project was guided by Bondra's social cognitive theory. First articulated in 1986, social cognitive theory centers on three core constructs: self efficacy, self monitoring, and behavioral reinforcement, operating within a reciprocal relationship between a person's behavior, personal factor, and environment. In practice, weekly virtual coaching sessions were designed to build participants' self efficacy around weight management. The food and activity logs, operationalized self monitoring, and the telemedicine platform itself was intended to reduce environmental barrier like transportation and clinic availability that normally stand in the way of self management. This framework did not just inform the intervention design, it also shaped which instruments were selected, since the behavioral and self efficacy survey itself chosen were grounded in these same constraints. Turning now to the method. This was a mixed method, exploratory quality improvement project guided by Plan Do Study Act or PDSA cycle. It took place at Chada Medical Clinic in DeQuincy, Louisiana, a rural primary care clinic serving patient population with limited access to obesity care. The intervention itself was an 8 weeks telemedicine self-care program delivered through weekly virtual coaching session lasting 20 to 45 minutes over a HIPAA compliant platform. Data came from multiple sources: pre and post intervention Qualtrics surveys, weekly food and activity logs, weight tracking logs, telemedicine session logs, and a retrospective chart reviews of BMI. Telehealth delivery was chosen specifically because it reduces geographic and transportation barrier and allowed for a rolling enrollment, which was important given the reality of a rural patient population. Several instruments supported data collection. Pre and post intervention survey administered through Qualtrics captured diary habits, physical activity, emotional wellness, and self efficacy using item adopted from validated behavioral scales. Participants also kept food diaries and activity logs, either on a paper or through an app like MyFitnessPal. A simple weekly weight tracking log was used to calculate BMI at baseline and at the end of the intervention. Telemedicine session logs and field notes were captured, attendance, coaching topics, and engagement. BMI itself was abstracted retrospectively from the medical record using a structured, audit ready data sheet. Now let's discuss the sample. The final sample included 32 rural adults with obesity who completed the full 8 weeks intervention. Out of 50 individuals initially screened as eligible, to be eligible, participant had to be between 18 and 89 years old, live in a rural area with limited healthcare access, have a BMI of 30 or greater, have access to a smartphone, tablet, or computer, be willing to commit to 8 to 10 weeks of participation, and provide informed consent. Participants were excluded if they were 90 or older, had a medical condition that contraindicated weight loss, not having telemedicine capable technology, had undergone bariatric surgeries in the past year, or were enrolled in another structured weight loss program. The final sample was 27 females and 5 males with mean baseline BMI of 35.41 and a standard deviation of 5.27. For the analysis plan, descriptive statistics were used to summarize both demographic characteristics and BMI variables, including mean, standard deviation, and confidence interval. Before selecting an inferential test, the normality of BMI at the baseline and 8 weeks and the change score were assessed using Kolmogorov and Sharpe-Weld tests. All three variables violated the assumption of normality because a paired t-test requires normal distribution data. The Wilcoxon sign rank test was used instead. The appropriate non-parametric alternative for paired data that isn't normally distributed. The resulting effect size was R equal to negative 0.87. A large effect and significance was set at p less than 0.05. All analyses were conducted in SPSS. Before walking through the specific outcomes of this intervention, I want to orient you to what we were measuring in this project. The primary outcome of this project was the change in BMI from the baseline to 8 weeks post intervention. Contextual secondary information on self care confidence and perceived helpfulness of telehealth was also collected. Though this was used descriptively, not as a formal outcome measure, importantly, all 32 enrollees completed the intervention with complete BMI and survey data. So there was no missing outcome data to account for. I will walk you through with a specific finding on the following slide. This slide illustrates the project's implementation timeline. Because the enrollment was rolling rather than tied to a single start date, participants begin their individual 8 weeks sequence at different points between November 11, 2025 and April 12, 2026. Despite the different dates, every participant moved through the identical sequence of steps: baseline assessment, weekly coaching and self monitoring, and a final post intervention assessment. This flexible structure allowed the project to accommodate real world scheduling constraints, including two major holidays, while still ensuring that all 32 participants completed the same standardized 8 weeks protocol with no missing days. This figure shows the gender distribution of the sample. As mentioned earlier, the sample was predominantly female at 84.4%, with male participants marking up to remaining 15.6%. This distribution is fairly typical of a study examining engagement with a structured lifestyle and weight management program, where women are frequently overrepresented, which is something I will return to discuss in the limitation of this project. Now, let's take a look to this histogram. This histogram shows the distribution of BMI values at baseline before the intervention started. The distribution is right skewed, which most participants clustering in the mid 30s range for BMI, but with a tail extending towards the higher value. This skew is a part of why the data ultimately failed formal test of normality. This is the corresponding histogram for BMI at the end of 8 weeks, following the intervention compared to the baseline distribution. There is a leftward shift, meaning more participants move towards the lower BMI value. The overall shape of distribution remains somewhat skewed, but this shift is an early visual indicator of reduction confirmed statistically in the Wilcoxon test result. Now, this is final histogram that shows the distribution of individual BMI changes score that was calculated by subtracting each participant's baseline BMI from their post intervention BMI. The vast majority of participants show negative values, meaning a reduction in BMI, and the distribution is noticeably narrower than either the pre or post BMI distribution individually, indicating the improvement was fairly consistent across the sample rather than driven by a few outliers. Let's check out this table. This table represents the former statistical test. Of 32 participants, 31 showed a decrease in BMI from pre to post intervention. Only one participant showed an increase, and there was no ties. The Wilcoxon signed rank produced a z values of negative minus 4.921 with a p-value of less than 0.001. This is highly significant statistical result, indicating the reduction in BMI observed was very unlikely to have occurred by chance. This table summarizes the descriptive statistics of BMI at each time point. Baseline BMI averaged 35.41 with a standard deviation of 5.27. At 8 weeks, mean BMI had dropped to 34.03 with a standard deviation of 5.44. The average change score was negative 1.39, meaning participant lost on average close to 1.39 BMI points from the baseline. As mentioned earlier, the assumption of normality was formally tested before choosing a statistical test. Both the Kolmogorov And Sharpio-Wilk test confirmed that BMI at baseline, 8 weeks, and the change score all significantly deviated from a normal distribution, with a p-value below zero point zero 0.05 for every measure. This confirmed that a parametric test like the pair T test would not have been appropriate here. Beyond the BMI, participants' self reported confidence in managing their weight was also tracked using a Likert type scale administered before and after the intervention. As this graph shows, confidence increased meaningfully from pre to post, which aligned with the behavioral reinforcement and self efficacy construct from social cognitive theory that underpinned this project's design. Finally, participants were asked how helpful they found telemedicine in supporting their own obesity self management. The results were strongly positive. 17 participants said they strongly agreed that telemedicine was helpful, and 12 more said that they somewhat agreed. Only a handful of participant had a neutral or a negative response. This high level of acceptability is encouraging sign for the feasibility of scaling this kind of intervention in similar rural healthcare settings. No project is without its limitation, and I want to be transparent about several that I faced here. This was a single site design conducted at one rural clinic, which limit how generalizable these findings are to other rural, or especially if it's an urban area. There was also meaningful reduction from 50 individuals initially screened down to 32 enrolled finally and completed the program. And it's possible that those who stayed were more digitally literate or more motivated than those who dropped out. The 8 weeks follow up period, while sufficient to detect short term change, does not tell us anything about long term weight maintenance. On the other hand, self reported weight and behavioral logs were also relied on in place, which introduced some risk of recall or social desirability bias. There was no comparison or control group. So while the pre post design showed a significant change, it limits how confidently we can attribute that change specifically to the intervention rather than to the other factors. And finally, the intervention period overlapped with both Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays, which may have affected adherence for some participants. The clinical significance of these findings is that a statistically significant BMI reduction was achieved using a telehealth self care model, supporting expanded telehealth access specifically for underserved rural population. A few facilitators stood out during the implementation phase: a strong participant motivation, structured telehealth encounters, and consistent weekly coaching and goal settings. On the barrier side, digital literacy challenges, holiday related schedule disruption, and inconsistent provider familiarity with the referral processes all created friction. One unintended consequences worth highlighting here. Of 50 individuals originally identified as eligible, only 32 ultimately enrolled, largely due to connectivity and technology barrier, which required additional troubleshooting and provider communication throughout the project. Let's explore the implication for practice. What does this mean for practice? First, these findings support integrating telemedicine self care coaching directly into rural primary care and specifically into family nurse practitioner led obesity management. Structured self monitoring paired with weekly virtual coaching appears to be something nurse practitioner can feasibly deliver without requiring patient to come in for an in-person visit. From a policy standpoint, These results support continued and expanded telehealth reimbursement and infrastructure investment for underserved rural population. Practically speaking, digital literacy support should be built directly into future onboarding process to reduce technology related issues. And future coaching cohort should be scheduled with an awareness of seasonal and holiday disruption. To conclude, this quality improvement project found a statistically significant reduction in BMI with a Z score of negative 4.921 and a p value of less than 0.001 and a large effect size of R equal to negative zero point 0.87. Among rural adults completing an 8-week telemedicine self care intervention, these results support telemedicine as a feasible and effective strategy for extending obesity self management to underserved population. If this project were repeated, the follow up period would be extended and a comparison group added to the strengthen the causal interference that can be drawn. Looking ahead, this work should be replicated across multiple sites with longer follow up periods and standardized digital literacy support built in from the start. On a personal note, completing this project deeply deepened my clinical and scholarly capacity to translate evidence into a rural, patient centered obesity care and strengthen my commitment to advancing health equity through telehealth innovation. These are some of the references that I used and cited for this presentation. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.